As my most anticipated movie of the past 2 years, Dune had a lot of expectations riding on it, and it did not disappoint. Now I'll start off with non-spoilers for the few people that have not gone out and seen the movie already. Go see it. And then I'll move on to spoilers and discuss the few things that I had problems with, and overall what I liked and didn't like about the movie. The first thing I really want to discuss is the visuals and the music. Denis Villeneuve and Hans Zimmer brought their A-game. This movie is a spectacle. Everything you see and hear is so engaging and new for you that you're never bored while watching this movie. In terms of set design and visuals, this feels like its own world. All the ships and all the planets and all of the places you go to are so thoroughly fleshed out visually, and the scale is on par or bigger than what I was imagining while I read the book. In terms of plot, this is an extremely faithful adaptation. Now, if you're a book reader and expecting to get every single little detail fleshed out as is done in the books, you'll be a little bit disappointed. It hits the most important notes of the story and explains the things that are the most relevant. Now, what is left out can be seen as important and does add a lot of depth to the story and world building, but there is a part 2 hopefully being made that will add on to these things. In terms of acting, everybody did a phenomenal job. There are no bad performances in this movie. The actors really embody the characters, and they are as I imagined them in the books. Now, I do have some qualms about the way a few of them were written and the depth given to certain really important players. Like, there's a person that has an extremely key piece in the plot that is given none of the depth he has in the books, and the key moment that he participates in is left kind of flat. The main problem I have with this movie, and it's a weird one to have, is not enough exposition. Now, there's so much lore and depth in the Dune book and universe that the movie really has to cut out a whole lot to make a reasonable runtime and keep the pace going well. There are scenes where Paul is studying the world of Arrakis, and honestly, it was a great way to divulge exposition, and there were certain key players within the movie that definitely needed more explanation, especially the Bene Gesserit, which play a huge part, or they didn't even mention the name Mentats, which are extremely key in running the world of Dune. I think both book readers and people who have no clue what Dune is will enjoy this movie. I thoroughly recommend going and watching this, and do not watch it on HBO Max unless you have a very nice home theater setup. You need to go to the theaters for this. The visuals and the audio are on such a scale that you need to experience it in a professional setup. Overall, I was far from disappointed, and this movie was definitely worth the wait. Go and see it immediately as soon as you can, then come back here and listen to the spoilers section. I'm going to jump in here and say like and subscribe if you guys enjoy these videos. Onto the spoilers. Starting off spoilers, I want to talk about some positive things I loved about the movie. The voice and the spice visions that Paul had were done extremely well. Honestly, I liked the voice in the movie better than I imagined it in the books. Another thing that was great was Duncan Idaho. I was pretty impartial to him when I read in the books. Yeah, his sacrifice was pretty sad, but I think he was given a lot more characterization here, as Jason Momoa essentially just played himself, but it worked really well. I already touched on how amazing the visuals and audio were, and how well adapted this story was, especially for a movie with such a short runtime. Now I want to talk about the few issues I had with the movie as a whole. The biggest problem with the plot and story was the exclusion of the Dr. Yue scenes. I saw on Twitter that there was film scenes of Dr. Yue getting characterization and him being more of a factor within the Atreides family. But in the movie, he has like a couple scenes of checking up with Paul, and besides that, there's nothing to him. And so when he betrays Leto and the family, there is no impact at all. In the book, there's multiple instances of you getting to know Dr. Yue and him being seen as a trusted advisor to the Atreides. But in the movie, he's just some random dude that's a doctor that administers Paul a couple of times. To a lesser extent, some things that needed to be fleshed out more were both the Bene Gesserit and the Reverend Mother, along with what the hell Mentats were. Sufir Hawa and Piter were essentially non-factors and not explained at all. You saw Hawat's eyes flick up in the back of his head and press the button in his neck, but they didn't expand at all on how these are essentially computer people. Now, this isn't really a small detail you can cut because Paul is being trained as both Bene Gesserit and Mentat. So when he transforms into a more cold, calculating person, this is part of the process. Now, in the part 2, I'm definitely sure that Hawa will get more play as he is involved in the story with the Harkonnens a little bit. I won't get into spoilers in case you haven't read the book. The Reverend Mother, while on screen, does an excellent job. The way she commands Jessica, the way she acts with Paul is all great, but there's no explanation that the Bene Gesserit essentially run the Empire behind the scenes. It's barely mentioned in the movie that Lady Jessica herself is a Bene Gesserit. In the book, it's reiterated over and over again what she is, and she is as much of a key player in the way the Atreides household is run as Duke Leto himself. Some other things that definitely could have used more information, especially for the people that have not read the book, are the spacing guilds and how they control travel throughout this universe, spice in how exactly it works, and finally the Emperor and the power dynamic between the houses, and why exactly he would want to remove the Atreides family. Another little inconsistency in the film that's really a non-factor in terms of plot is the shields. Now, in the beginning, you have the scene with Paul's little practice duel where it's super emphasized that you have to go slow to get through the shield. And later on, you've got Duncan Idaho just piecing guys up at Mach 1. A really important factor of the Emperor's power dynamic within the houses is him being neutral. Although he is giving the Sardaukar to the Harkonnens to kill the Atreides, in the book they are disguised as Harkonnens. In here, they're just straight up Sardaukar, they're recognized immediately, and now if that were to happen, all the houses would turn on the Emperor. This is an inconsistency that really could have been prevented with just like a small costume change. Now this isn't really important to the people who haven't read the book, but if they do plan on having more installations, whether it's movie or TV shows, this is an extremely important factor in the power dynamic of this world. Something Denis really could have upped was the Harkonnens' cruelty and how evil they are. Really, you're just kind of rooting against them because they're bald, fat people, not really because they're super bad. Yeah, they kill Duke Leto and they stage a coup, but you really have no reason to hate them. In the books, their cruelty is shown on Arrakis. The Baron is a child molesting creep. They are evil people and you are made sure to see that. Something that didn't really bother me, but I'm sure somebody will pick a problem with, is Dr. Liet Kynes is now a woman. I don't really know why the change. I don't really care. Doesn't make a difference. But something that does make a difference is they didn't include her dying scene with the Muad'Dib little rat thing. Now that was the foreshadowing of the survival in the desert and who Paul will be, and that would have been a nice little scene to have in the middle of the movie. I also wish the Sardaukar had been a bit more dangerous and better fighters. This would have made Duncan's final scene a lot more impactful. Instead of him just slaughtering fodder, these would have been extreme killers that had destroyed the Atreides army. Some of my favorite scenes in the movie are after the Atreides compound has fallen and Paul and Jessica are transported to the desert. The use of the voice in the ornithopter and then going through the storm, and then finally trying to survive in the desert and find the Fremen is all done so well. That scene with Jessica and Paul in the sand tent where he's yelling at her and also tripping balls was probably one of the best scenes in the movie, and both the actors did a great job of bringing it to life. Now to talk about the final confrontation with Hamis or Jamis, however it's pronounced, it was a little disappointing. I kind of wish it was shot like more gladiator style. It wasn't a very epic fight. It was really just a scuffle in the desert and the introduction to Cheney. Earlier in that scene, some people may be confused of how Jessica so easily beats up and disarms Stilgar, but that's another reason why the Bene Gesserit needed to be fleshed out more and explained how powerful and well trained these people are. Because the Fremen are shown as extremely good fighters and described as better warriors than the Sardaukar themselves. And for Jessica to beat up Stilgar so easily, that'll leave a couple people confused that don't know the background of the Bene Gesserit. As I was saying, I wish Paul's fight with Hamis had been way more epic. Like, yeah, it is just two guys in a circle, but you could have filmed it more than just a still shot with them shuffling in between each other. Now, I know Paul being so much of a better fighter than him makes it hard to add stakes and epicness to the moment, but this is the conclusion to the first part, and you want to leave people on a high note. And that final scene of them just staring off into the desert is really not what most people will remember. Now, if the Hamis fight had been more exciting and more climactic, I think it would have left people with a better taste in their mouth than really no taste at all. Because the ending was very abrupt, just cut to credits, and people were like, oh, movie's over, I guess? And there was not a really satisfying conclusion to a first half. Now, that's the key thing, is it is a first half. I can't wait to watch 7 hours of Dune in a row in a couple of years. Overall, I love this movie. Now, I want to give this movie a 9 out of 10, although I did have my complaints, and a good amount of them. They all revolved around doing more of what was already being done. And this is a movie, it's not a TV show, it's not a book. And I am completely satisfied with everything that they included within this film. I think they covered the main points. Yes, I would have wanted more, but that's an extremely good thing. Just because they didn't have the full depth of a 900-page book, or a 2-season television show. It is still enough and extremely well done for 2 hours and 35 minutes. So 9 out of 10, go see this movie. Why are you in spoilers if you haven't seen the movie? And see you guys later.